Hello and a warm welcome to another episode. My guest today is Marc Grewenig, serial entrepreneur and co-founder at Emlen. Emlen is the pioneer in the buyer enablement space, and you will learn what buyer enablement means and why buyer-led growth is much more than a mindset shift. Welcome, Marc.
The topic is a new thing in town, buyer enablement. So it's such a pleasure to have you around. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you very much, Björn. I really appreciate your invitation. And yeah, I'm looking forward.
All right. So I would say let's jump into this new thing. Buyer enablement. Why do you have an authority on that topic, and what brought you to that topic?
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of Emlen. And there I'm mainly responsible for our whole GTM team. And so what we are working on or building at Emlen is more or less a buyer enablement platform that facilitates the exchange of valuable content and the collaboration between seller and buyer, empowering both of them to make better decisions during their interactions. And as we are building or working on a buyer enablement platform, so obviously, it's a huge topic, buyer enablement. So, and therefore, since the beginning, 2.5 years back, we highly focus on that topic.
And for you, it's a low-brainer, or it seems like a low-brainer. So why is it such a big and huge topic? And I also believe in that huge topic. So why is it important for you, and what do you see in kind of changing the overall environment of the market?
Yeah, probably we need to start or need to take one step back. So what is buyer enablement, I guess, in general, because before we dive a bit more deeper into the topic, if you would probably search for a definition, you will probably find something like buyer enablement is the information and tools provided to buyers to help them complete critical buying tasks faster and more easily. For me, often it sounds a bit boring, and I guess it's also probably not enough from my point of view. So I would probably add that buyer enablement more or less facilitates internal decision-making processes and gives buyers confidence in their decision-making to do the right decision or the right thing. I guess this is super important, and I also want to add end-to-end, and that's super important to mention from my point of view. So I see a lot of organizations or even tools that are looking at it. How can I transform a part of the journey now with this? That might be the logical or the right step by definition, but from my point of view, it's not the thing that will win at the end. So you have to keep in mind, I can't be buyer-centric in one part and back to the roots, let's say seller-centric. I'm in the other part. This topic, buyer enablement, I guess is super hot because, as you mentioned, there is a mind shift ongoing. 25 years back, so most of the organizations, they have been seller-centric, right? So large enterprise organizations. Then a couple of years back, they started this PLG as a product-led growth wave, and now at least that's we are believing, and the next big wave is buyer-led growth. So really, as I mentioned, giving or shifting the power from the sales org to the buyer org, and this is a little bit, let's say, the explanation of what we are working on.
Really fascinating topic, and just adding numbers to it, because I know that you recently published updated figures from Gartner. How many people actually involve sales or on the entire buying process? What is the amount or the share of direct sales engagement? So could you just share some of the really amazing figures, what happened over the last years?
Yeah, to back up a little bit the buyer enablement trend, I guess with some statistics, I guess you need to understand, or some statistics are that, almost 80% of today's B2B buyers state that their latest purchase has been more or less very difficult, right? So it was really hard for them. And there's also a statistic which is around about, I guess, the same percentage, so almost 80%, they wish to have more a B2C like buying experiences. And I guess this already shows them a lot. So what we are used to, I don't know, since decades, let's say in the consumer segment, today's B2B buyers, they kind of expect a similar experience. And I guess what you are more or less referring to is that, I guess more and more buyers, they really spend less time, let's say, with us, so with the selling organizations, today, I guess recently, or what we also advertised, there is this statistic that only 17% of let's say the buyer's journey is spent with the seller, right? And then, I mean, if you already split this, let's say you are checking out 2 or 3 vendors, it might go down to 5, 6, 7%. And I mean, what happens with the other, if we stick to the 17%, 83%, and this is exactly when we started Emlen, or let's say the buy enablement space takes care of. So what happens with the others 83%, where currently sales reps are flying blind. And beside that, another, let's say, important statistic might be also that more and more buyers, they wish a web-free experience. I guess I recently published something, it was not me, so it was Gartner. So they did a revision, let's say, on their report or on their vision in general, that around about 75% of today's B2B buyers kind of want to have a web-free experience. Obviously, it differs. Some people might say, okay, in this industry it might be different, but I mean, it's the average. So all probably verticals or industries, and they have been a part of this survey. And I guess this kind of like, backs the trend of buy enablement, I would say.
Yeah, and the other thing you mentioned is end-to-end. It's one of the core beliefs I have about go-to-market. It's end-to-end, so you really have to have the full perspective, the entire buyers, and then later on the customer journey. So let's dive into buyer enablement from an end-to-end perspective. How does it look like?
The buyer's journey is not starting mid or bottom of the funnel, right? So it starts with the first initial touch point, which is often started or kicked off from a marketing perspective, so from a demand capture perspective. And I guess their buyer enablement should start or starts. The greatest success of buyer enablement we see, and we have also, to be honest, is if we think and implement it end to end. I can see a lot of tools or also a lot of organizations, they kind of like pick one part in the journey. For example, after sales qualified leads, probably so round about the demo stage, so where you showcase or introduce your product. They try to be buyer centric. They make use of buyer enablement strategies there. But before that and afterwards, if it comes, for example, closing the client, onboarding, where also you have a lot of expertise, or let's say from a marketing perspective, there they stick more to the old school roots, which is a little bit weird from my point of view, because mid of the funnel, you have a really nice, cool experience, but before that and after that, you might have not a nice experience. And this is what I mean by end-to-end. I mean, from my point of view, a lot of organizations are not yet ready, because we know there are these issues around marketing sales alignment and customer success. They don't even know what marketing and sales is doing. So they just want to focus, let's say, on making the clients happy and so on and so on. So to also really work or start implementing end-to-end, the organization must be ready for this. And this is what I mean. Really, from initial touch point to deep closing and beyond is end-to-end, right?
Can we, I'm super intrigued. Can you share either kind of your own best practice or one of your clients to make it a little bit more tangible? So how does because I think we all know these kind of experience. I'm downloading a white paper either with a wall or without. So how does it look like the modern or the best case world from, let's start with marketing, and I'm getting in touch with your service or anyone else service. How does a great user experience or buyer experience look like?
I mean, again, so if we come back to this example, this is also what we have when we showcased our product to investors. I mean, where does the journey start? Perhaps it starts on your website, where you, for example, request or download a white paper. I mean, what happens then afterwards? You probably receive several email automated, let's say, messages. Okay, here's the white paper. Then 2-3 days later, you get, let's say, access here, the blog article or whatever. I guess it's kind of like the script campaigning, which is, from my point of view, outdated. I guess even top of the funnel, it's super important, as I mentioned, that most B2B buying orgs, they're not really talking to you before they might have a problem. They're looking for a solution, and then they might check out the vendors who are kind of like solving the pain points they have, that you already enable top of the funnel, let's say, the buyer to make the right decision to get into the next stage. And I guess by having this delayed automation week by week and trying to nurture them, I guess you lose a lot of time also from a selling perspective, but also your buyer loses a lot of time. So what our approach is, so why not curating and orchestrating, let's say, the most important and valuable information, let's say, for example, in one single space, we call them destination. There are also multiple other vendors. They might call it differently, and already enable, let's say, the buyer in this stage, okay, to make the right decision to jump into the next stage. So they can have internal discussions. They can already convince in the early days internal stakeholders they might need, and then you can take it from there, right? So you can dynamically adjust, let's say, the space, for example. Obviously, mid of the funnel or bottom of the funnel, there are different content assets, for example, or different information needed till declosing, and then even beyond, you can, for example, change, let's say, the content, which is important to ramp up the client and so on. So this is, let's say, a best practice. At least we are always recommending to clients to really streamline the overall process from the first initial touch point to closing and beyond. I hope that answers the question.
It sounds to me like a lot of the mindset of PLG. So depending on whether you're PLG ready. In the classic world, marketing is leading to let's have a demo or let's have a call, and you try to push the prospect quite early on in a human interaction. And what I'm listening from your point of view is that you give the choice to engage with your sales team, have a human interaction, or you request dynamically what kind of other information, other pieces to support your decision-making is needed.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, you give the power to the buyer. It's not like you need to follow my sales process, right? Which looks like this. So it's more like, okay, look, you requested some information. I gather, orchestrate all the information you probably need to take on the next step, whatever it is, right? So if you want to jump on a product demo, okay, you can do that. You can book it here, for example, or we have a clickable prototype where also is currently a big wave around this topic. So interactive product demos and so on. And I mean, can you create, let's say, an offer for me right away? Yes, I can do that. Or it happens dynamically, even automatically. I mean, in a perfect word, but it's not like, okay, as a next step, you need to do this, this, and this. And I guess this is a little bit the shift, which I also try to explain or try to emphasize for, which is currently happening. So from my point of view, you totally got it right. So whatever the next step is, you leave it to the buyer. And this is, I guess, this huge, let's say, trend, or let's say this huge shift, which is currently happening.
And on the flip side, I have huge in a different context, because for me, it's a mindset shift, because a lot of people in the scene and still kind of in a young scene is used to, this is the optimized sales funnel, or this is lead generation process, this is demand generation process, and at some point there's a sales handover. What you just described, totally makes sense. When it comes to structuring the organization, it's an entirely different thing. It could happen, depending on the product and service, that you enable the customer without any human interaction, or you at some point you have an engagement with the sales team. So I'm just curious about best practice or tips and tricks. How do I track this? Because I still have an outbound push part, and then I have more and more these buyer enablement stream. Or would you say you have to make a fundamental decision at the very end to have one motion or one general approach?
That's a good and also a tough question. It also heavily depends, let's say, on the product, service, or solution you kind of like offer, right? I mean, there might be still, especially in the highly complex or really educational, let's say, product and services, you will still have human touch points. And I mean, this is good, because I guess also most of the people always think, okay, so like from a seller perspective, what happens to me if this buyer enablement wave goes further? Do I still exist? Yes. I mean, you will probably the role will probably change, or let's say the things you're doing are changing. I can only talk, I mean, from a personal point of view, there are a lot of products, at least if you're selling, let's say, low ticket sizes, I mean, in general, where you kind of like should aim for a self-service approach, because whenever you have a outbound touch point, or you need to pick up the phone, or you need to spend, let's say, 1 hour in a discovery call or demo and so on, it might just not work in terms of the maths, right? So customer acquisition cost, and so on and so on. So I mean, we can see a lot of clients, especially if they market and sell low ticket sizes, they kind of like switch and want to have, in a perfect world, no touch point, let's say, with the buyer, right? If it works, let's see.
Great.
But but we can see a lot of let's say good indicators for this. But then obviously we have some organizations, larger ones, enterprises, they kind of like know that buyer enablement helps me within the different stages or touch points I have from a human point of view, right? So it's more about really equipping the buyer in this stage with the information as I needed that he needs to convince internally, right? So to take on the next steps, there might be multi-stakeholders involved, multi-threading. It's also, a big thing and so on. So it's really, you need to find, let's say for your own organization, let's say this fitting point, I would say, where really the buyer enablement strategy fits in. And that doesn't mean that from one to another day, hey, you just send out something like Emden, for example, one space, and then, it happens by itself, right? So the declosing, this is the wrong approach in general. So I guess it's, as I mentioned, highly dependent on, let's say, how your GTM, let's say, motion or your sales motion in general looks like, at least for now. But I guess by implementing a buyer enablement strategy here and there, it's definitely the way to go. And at the end, obviously, if you would ask me from a visionary standpoint, I always come to this car selling example. Hey, did you believe that 15 or 20 years back, you never ever need to go to let's say a car store to buy a car, right? So probably no one could have imagined, I need to talk to the guy, you need to explain, okay, what do I get? And now, you can configure, let's say, your own car in a couple of minutes online and buy it, right? And I guess this is also something what we are aiming for, let's say, probably more towards 2030-ish or so, or even behind that date. So we really believe also this B2B sales could be, or buying could be, some sort of a commodity at the end, right?
And I would totally agree. So I have it's so short where I'm just looking at the time, but I definitely have two questions, maybe even more. So first one is, where do you stop? So talking about SaaS, we have the initial sales, but then we have a lot of upsell, cross-sell. We have grow in the account. So maybe let's share also some of the benefits or what you have done already, not just aligning marketing or looking at the marketing and sales perspective. So what is happening in post-purchase and then expansion?
Yeah, currently, to be honest, I can only speak for ourselves or for myself. We are more focusing on acquiring customers, right? So just what you mentioned. So how does it look like end to end, from marketing to sales to really bottom of the funnel, so closing the deal, negotiating, multi-threading, different stakeholders or more stakeholders involved, both from the selling and the buying org. But obviously, we also make use of our own product or our clients, let's say, post-sales, in terms of ramping up clients or having engagement afterwards by, as you mentioned, pushing in some new product features or some new, let's say, collaterals, which kind of like helps to expand or to cross-sell also, your product and services. But this is something because we also need to find, let's say, focus. We are still a small team, in general. So therefore we focus more on acquiring the customer. But obviously, I had recently also a discussion with a revenue leader who does it since 25 or even 30 years and successfully. He mentioned also buyer enablement, because you would assume if you talk about a buyer, okay, you already kind of like sold them the product and he is now your client. How can we make use of such strategies post sales or after sales? So it's super interesting topic, as you mentioned, to expand or to cross sell. So buyer enablement doesn't stop, let's say, by acquiring, let's say, the client. This is what I want to mention. And to answer your question, there's also a huge potential. I can see also some products that kind of like focus on that specifically in the early days, that post sales, it can have also a huge impact, right? Because it just not stops when you acquire the client. I would say it just starts now, right? Because you need to make them happy and so on and so on.
Context is also, I'm a firm believer of focus, which brings me to the last topic, because it seems that you're creating a new category. It's in the involvement of, this is super new, it's a new space. So maybe just some tips and tricks and or learnings. How do you navigate through if you're creating a new thing?
As you mentioned, you have to understand that we're working on a new category. At least that's what we are thinking. So I guess no one wakes up at the morning and searches for buyer enablement, right? And that's a challenge for the whole GTM team, but also for the whole organization. But if I refer to the GTM, marketing, so what to message, sales, to whom and how, and customer success. Hey, so how do I make them successful, and showing them how important the impact they have really is, right? So, I mean, I can still remember very well. So when we founded Emlyn a little bit more than 2.5 years ago, and we wanted or had to present, I mean, our vision, our product. So when we talked about buyer enablement, buyer experience, and so on, I often saw 3 big question marks, I mean, circling above the head of our conversation partner. We realized positioning and messaging were becoming extremely important and are still today. So I generally believe that's never done. It remains of the main items on my agenda. So within the GTM team to this day. So I think you have to make a bit of a trade-off here, that you make it understandable so that everyone who is in your target group understands it, but without losing sight of the vision if it comes to build a new category, right? So of course, it also helps that there is a lot of going on now in the market. More and more players on a global level are joining the wave, let's say, of buyer enablement, which is very cool to see and a good thing also. For us, even big sales enablement players kind of like have noticed there is no way around it anymore. And I mean, as pioneers in the space, I mean, this makes us also some sort of a little bit proud, I would say. This, of course, raises more and more awareness about what we see as a super important topic. So it's really about this trade-off from my point of view, and maybe also struggled a little bit at the beginning, to be honest. Okay, how do we pitch and explain buyer enablement in a super easy, understandable way, especially to potential clients, without, let's say, losing the vision, let's say, in what we are really working on or what we want to build, let's say, how the product looks like in 2030, for example. And I guess we are not alone there. That's a challenge also for others, not only in the buyer enablement space or whenever it comes to a new category. And I guess there you need to find off a good, let's say, balanced mixture.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the way to go.
Yeah, I really like that, because I normally, to make it digestible, I often use a framework kind of, there is strategy, tactics, and operations. So you have this, you need this direction, and then you have to balance or prioritize what is coming next. And then, of course, it's about execution. And it's constantly, that's why I love early stage so much. It's constantly evolving back and forth. And then it has to be, it needs to get done with the right goal in mind, midterm or long term. I really like that one. Last one, I have to ask it, because you were mentioning sales enablement and buyer enablement. For me, entirely different things, but I dare to say that sometimes people think that you are just another sales enablement provider.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I guess definitely you need to, I mean, let me try to explain it this way. I mean, sales enablement, I mean, from my point of view, or if you also would probably search through the definition, is more or less, let's say, the iterative process of providing your business sales team with the resources they need to close more deals, right? I mean, these resources may be content, tools, knowledge, so training. Just the information. Yep. I mean, so I mean, to effectively sell your product or service to customers, right? I've heard the question a lot, and of course, I mean, you can imagine, and I always like to answer it very briefly. I mean, sales enablement enables sellers to sell, and buyer enablement enables the buyer to buy. So don't sell, help buy. I guess some evil tongues, I'm not sure if that exists in English, but I hope so, would probably claim, as you mentioned, okay, Marc, that's just a few words turned around or modified. No, I mean, it's a completely different way of thinking and approaching how you also communicate today, right? And I mean, we talked about it at the beginning. This mind shift is, from my point of view, or from our point of view, or not only from our point of view, I mean, in full swing. And there I can probably bring one, I guess, also to kind of like close this, one nice customer quote from a really great customer we have. They really think the same way we are doing. They mentioned once, I guess, Emlyn built the product the right way around. So we first focus on creating, let's say, a delightful buyer experience and make it easy to buy, and then taking on topics like, for example, content management and so on, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of like nails it down from my point of view. So it's a huge difference also in how you think, how you approach your sales motion, your GTM motion, if you think buyer first, or let's say sales first. And I can only talk for us, it's not only about GTM. So we have, for example, a company value which says we are buyer-centric at our heart. So not only in the GTM team, of course, but throughout the entire company, we build initiatives around this. A developer has to understand, that in order to develop the product in the right direction, so let's say with a buyer focus and to develop the feature, just like HR has to understand, which people we want and need, of course, and how we win customers in the GTM team. I guess it's a huge difference. And you can also see that a lot of sales enablement players, they at least market, let's say, on their collaterals and so on. Okay, buyer experience, buyer enablement. So there's more and more talking around it, which is good.
Marc, thanks so much. It was a perfect ending story. Everything was inside. So mindset, also some practical stuff. So it was super short while extremely insightful. I'm a huge fan and supporter of that movement, also from a very egoistic point of view. So there is still a lot of improvement in improving the buyer experience. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Björn. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.